The dog went crazy and would not stop barking at the coffin. What was inside was chilling. It was a gloomy autumn morning in the outskirts of the city. The air was somber, and a gentle breeze blew through the trees around. The house of Officer Richard's family was situated in a quiet area, far from the noise of the city. The house seemed like a peaceful and serene place, but today the atmosphere inside was heavy with worry and anxiety. Richard, a former military officer, had passed away after a long battle with an illness caused by the aftereffects of the war. The pain and the memories of the battlefield tormented him throughout his last years. His funeral was being held in this house, where family and friends gathered to bid farewell to the soldier who had devoted his entire life to the country. Max, Richard's loyal dog, had been with him through the difficult years. Max was a small, golden-furred dog with bright, shining eyes. However, today, everything had changed. Max was not like he usually was. The dog refused to leave Richard's coffin, staring intensely at the sealed casket in the living room, his ears standing up and regular barks coming from him, as if he was sensing something very unusual. Richard's family tried to calm the dog down. They thought that Max was just anxious because of the change in the house. However, Max would not listen. Every time someone approached the coffin, the dog barked even more furiously, his eyes filled with fear. Max's barks seemed to be warning of something, but no one could understand. A close friend of Richard's, Mr. Thomas, was the only one who understood that something was wrong. He had witnessed the bond between Richard and Max, especially during the years of war. Richard wasn't the type to openly express his emotions, but Max had always been the only friend he could confide in. As the funeral went on, an eerie silence enveloped the house. But Max remained an odd presence in the still room. No one understood why the dog was barking like mad. Max's barks sounded like the cries of a creature in deep distress, as if he sensed something dangerous hidden within the house itself. While everyone else quietly talked and bid farewell to the departed, Max continued to bark, running around the coffin as if searching for something. The dog didn't stop, even when someone tried to pull him away. Max's gaze grew more and more tense, as if there was a strange connection between the dog and the death of his owner. The atmosphere in the house seemed to grow even heavier. A sense of unease filled the air, and no one could explain the strange behavior of Max. The feeling that something was wrong became more apparent. The lights in the living room flickered, and the air turned colder than ever. Max kept barking, his barks like a warning that no one could understand. Max wouldn't stop barking, and as Mr. Thomas looked at the coffin, a vague fear filled his heart. Could it be that Max was sensing something they could not see? Max's barking was different from before. It was full of urgency and panic. The small dog stood beside the coffin, eyes wide open, staring fixedly at the tightly closed casket. Max's barks sounded as though something inside the coffin was calling him, or worse, was trying to get out. Richard's family began to feel confused. They tried to pull Max away, but the dog refused to listen. Every time someone approached, Max barked louder, his barks ripping through the stillness of the room. The dog scratched at the coffin with his claws, as if trying to open the lid, or as if something inside was making him act this way. At that moment, the atmosphere in the room began to change. A coldness gradually spread, as if the surrounding space was covered by an invisible fog. The lights in the living room began to flicker, sometimes turning off completely, then coming back on, making the room feel even more eerie. Max's barks didn't stop, growing more frantic and filled with fear. He turned to look at the people, his eyes filled with confusion, as if begging someone to understand him. One of Richard's friends, Mr. Thomas, approached Max, trying to comfort him. But the moment Mr. Thomas placed his hand on Max's back, the dog turned and stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. Max barked more furiously than ever, as if Mr. Thomas wasn't the person he was trying to protect. A strange feeling arose in Mr. Thomas's heart. Could it be that Max was seeing something that the others could not? No one dared to approach the coffin at that moment. They stood looking at each other, their anxiety growing. There was certainly something very strange happening, but no one knew how to explain it. Max kept pacing back and forth, barking nonstop and unable to calm down. Each of Max's barks felt like a warning, as if the dog was telling them that something terrifying was waiting inside the coffin. But what worried everyone most was the feeling in the air. It wasn't like any funeral they had ever attended. All of those present could feel a strange presence, as if a ghost was lurking somewhere in the room. The atmosphere grew heavier, and all sound seemed to be swallowed up. Max, the loyal dog, continued barking, his barks echoing throughout the house, filling the still space and making everyone feel uneasy. And so Max kept barking, showing no signs of stopping. With each passing second, the curiosity and fear in everyone grew. What was waiting inside that coffin? It was clear that Max knew something they could not understand. Time seemed to stand still. The entire house was engulfed in silence, except for Max's barking, echoing through the room. The dog's barks were not just noises, they contained panic and fear, as if something horrible was hiding inside the coffin. Max wasn't just standing still, he was running around the coffin, each step a desperate attempt, as if trying to prevent something from happening. Richard's family felt helpless. They had tried everything to calm Max, calling his name, comforting him, even pulling him out of the living room, but nothing worked. Max refused to leave. He stiffened, eyes wide open, staring intently at the coffin as if he was seeing something horrific inside. Whenever someone approached the coffin, the dog would rush over, barking louder, as if trying to push them away. A strange feeling began to spread through the room. Everyone felt that the air had become heavy, suffocating. The atmosphere was cold, as if an invisible wind had swept through, and the air felt damp, as if night had arrived too soon. The lights in the living room flickered, occasionally turning off before coming back on, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Max wasn't just barking, he was also scratching at the coffin, his claws scraping the hard wood, the sharp sounds like a warning. The dog didn't stop, didn't rest. Each bark seemed like a sign of urgency, as if something terrible would happen if he did not do so. But something made everyone wonder. Was Max seeing something they could not see? When Mr. Thomas approached Max to try to comfort him, something strange happened. Max turned to look at him with eyes that were not familiar, not the gaze of a dog who loved his owner. Max's eyes were bright with fear, as though he was trying to warn him, as if Mr. Thomas wasn't the person he wanted to protect. Thomas felt a chill run through him. Everyone could see the worried look on his face, but no one dared to speak up. No one dared to say that they too felt there was something strange, something unexplainable happening right in this house. Max was no ordinary dog. He wasn't barking like any other dog. This dog was trying to communicate something, but no one could understand what it was. Everyone present at that moment could feel one thing. Max was not barking because of normal anxiety, but because something was wrong, something hidden inside the coffin. Curiosity slowly turned into fear. Max wouldn't stop. His barks echoed in everyone's hearts, making it impossible for them to escape the growing anxiety. Was someone inside the coffin trying to communicate with them, or was Max trying to signal a secret that had yet to be revealed? The people began to look at each other, an ambiguous feeling rising in their hearts. No one dared to touch the coffin, but no one could leave either, as the curiosity about what was hidden inside grew stronger. With every passing second, Max's barking grew more desperate, as if he was terrified of something only he could understand. The feeling of unease in the house was growing stronger. Everyone present felt that something was wrong, but no one dared to speak up. Max continued to bark, and now it was not just the dog sensing something strange. Everything around them seemed to be covered in an invisible fog, heavy and suffocating. The air was cold, as if emanating from somewhere deep inside the house, causing everyone to feel a chill run through them. The lights in the living room flickered non-stop. First, they were dim, then suddenly blindingly bright, and then they went out again. Strange shadows appeared on the walls, sometimes resembling a person, other times resembling an animal. The entire room seemed to have become dark and full of ambiguity. People only looked at each other, no one saying a word, but everyone felt an unexplainable sense of worry, Max continued to bark, but now his barking was no longer like usual calls. It sounded more like a growl, as though he could not bear whatever terrifying thing was happening. The dog was trying to communicate something, but no one could understand. Each time Max ran around the coffin, he would stop and look at it as if something inside was looking back at him. Everyone followed Max's gaze, but no one saw anything but the sealed coffin. Outside the window, the space grew darker and cold winds blew through, causing the leaves in the yard to swirl as if they were dancing in a strange, eerie waltz. No one said anything, but everyone had the feeling that there was something out of sight, something very close, yet invisible. A faint sound echoed through the still room. At first, everyone thought it was just the wind, but then the sound occurred again. This time it was clearer, like something gently scraping across the wood surface. People turned their gaze to the coffin, but no one dared to approach. Max suddenly stopped, staring at the coffin with eyes full of fear, and then a loud bark erupted, like a warning. The dog knelt, his ears drooping, and his eyes never left the coffin. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind blew through, causing the lights to flicker again. A strange sensation overwhelmed the room. Everyone present felt as though an invisible gaze was watching them from somewhere, like a ghost lurking in the living room. The air became heavy, and everyone exchanged worried glances, but no one dared to voice their thoughts. It seemed that something inside the coffin did not want to be discovered, did not want anyone to open it. Max, Richard's loyal dog, seemed to know this well. But could he stop barking? Was there something hidden inside the coffin, and could the truth be something they might never want to know? As the lights flickered once more in the living room, everyone felt the anxiety rise sharply. Something was definitely waiting, and all Max was trying to do was warn them of a dark secret yet to be revealed. No one in the room could bear it anymore. The air grew even heavier, and the strangeness surrounding them could no longer be ignored. Max continued to bark wildly, his eyes filled with fear, as if something terribly dangerous was hiding in that coffin. Everyone began to feel an overwhelming fear rising in their hearts. There was something they did not understand, a secret that had yet to be uncovered. Mr. Thomas, Richard's old friend, was the first to speak. With a tense expression, he looked at the coffin, then turned to face the others. "Maybe we should open the coffin," he said, his voice low and full of worry. "Max hasn't stopped barking for a reason. We need to know what is inside." The room fell silent. No one dared to say anything. All eyes were fixed on the coffin, and in that moment, the feeling of unease grew even stronger. Everyone sensed the danger, but no one could look away. No one knew what would happen if they opened the coffin, but curiosity and fear had made it impossible to turn back. Finally, one of Richard's family members, Mrs. Laura, decided to approach. She and Thomas together lifted the coffin lid. The old wooden lid creaked as it was pulled back, the sound echoing like a warning. Everyone in the room held their breath, no one daring to move. They seemed to be waiting for something dreadful to happen the moment the coffin lid was opened. And then the coffin lid was slowly raised. Faint lights from the lamps illuminated everything, making everything in the room appear blurry. When the lid was completely opened, everyone was stunned. But what they saw was not Richard, as they had believed all this time. Instead, inside the coffin was another man, younger, with a face still very familiar. He looked like a warrior, with old wounds on his body, a calm expression, but he was not Richard. Richard's family and the others present were speechless. A cold chill ran down their spines. Mr. Thomas was the first to recognize him. "This is Richard's comrade," he murmured, his eyes wide with shock. "He died in a battle. No one knew he was still alive. But Richard has kept this secret for all these years." Everyone seemed to snap out of their stupor after Mr. Thomas's words. It turned out that the person they thought had died in the war was actually Richard's close comrade. He had died on a mission no one knew about, and Richard had kept his body in a coffin all these years, hiding the truth. But why had Richard done this? Why hadn't he told anyone? Max suddenly stopped barking. The dog turned and looked at the coffin, then at the others, as if he had completed his task. A strange silence enveloped the room, while each person was overwhelmed by what they had just witnessed. Richard's secret had been revealed, but it only raised more questions than answers. Why had Richard kept his deceased comrade all these years? And could this be the reason Max had always been barking and acting strangely? The sense of curiosity, fear, and unease lingered in everyone's hearts, but they knew that everything had changed forever. After the coffin was opened, the room fell into silence. Everyone stared at the body of the strange man, someone they did not know, but with a strange connection to Richard. The atmosphere grew heavy and full of confusion. Questions raced through their minds, but no one dared to ask. No one dared to speak about the strange things they had just witnessed. Max no longer barked. The dog quietly stood beside the coffin, but his eyes never left the body inside. Sighs were heard, and some began to feel a sense of indescribable fear. It seemed like something was lurking in the shadows, threatening to emerge and change everything they knew. Mr. Thomas, Richard's old friend, was the only one unable to contain his worry. This can't be true," he muttered, his voice dropping. "Richard couldn't have kept this secret forever. There is something we do not know." People started looking at each other, their eyes filled with confusion, unsure how to explain what was happening. Richard's family was shocked. They had never heard of this man. Why was there a secret comrade, and why had Richard kept this hidden for so many years? Was there something horrifying in the past that they had never known? The truth behind the man in the coffin seemed to have opened a massive door full of secrets. Max, Richard's loyal dog, stood still in silence. But suddenly, the dog turned his head to look at a corner of the room where no one had noticed. The faint light from the lamps began to flicker, then went out completely, leaving the room in darkness. A strange feeling rose in everyone's hearts. Why was Max staring at that corner? Did the dog see something that they could not? Everyone felt a chill spread through the air, as if an invisible presence was standing close to them. It felt as though Richard's death was not the end, but rather the beginning of something far more horrifying. Memories of the war, the wounds that could never heal from the past, all seemed to resurface, threatening them. Mr. Thomas finally couldn't control himself any longer. He walked up to the man in the coffin, his face filled with tension and worry. "We need to find out the truth," he said. "We cannot leave things like this." He gently placed his hand on the man's body, but as he did, something strange happened. A cold gust of wind blew through the room, causing the lights to flicker. Suddenly, everything seemed to fall into absolute silence. A faint sound like a soft hiss echoed in the air. Someone in the room flinched, their eyes wide with confusion. "Do you hear that?" one person asked, their voice trembling. Everyone fell silent, listening carefully. The wind continued to blow, and then, once again, the hiss came, this time louder, closer. It was like a call from the darkness. Max suddenly stood up and began barking furiously again, but this time, his barking was not a usual warning. It sounded like a scream, as if he were facing something more terrifying than death itself. No one could understand, but they could feel the danger approaching. Fear enveloped them all. No one dared to approach the coffin. Instead, everyone backed away, their eyes full of confusion and unease. Why was Max reacting this way? Why was the dog so terrified that he could not stop barking? Was there something in Richard's past that they did not know, and could that secret be the source of all these strange events? Unanswered questions began to swirl around them. Each person wondered, could the truth be something we can't bear to know? The feelings of curiosity and fear closed in on them, and they knew that sooner or later they would have to face a dark secret that even Max was too afraid to confront. The air in the room grew thick and heavy. Everyone stood still, their eyes glued to Max, who was still barking wildly, as if warning about something no one could see. Despite their curiosity driving them closer to the coffin, now each person felt an invisible force holding them back, preventing them from taking another step forward. They felt as though they were surrounded by a mysterious power they couldn't understand. Max suddenly stopped, no longer barking. The dog stood still, his eyes never leaving the coffin, and everyone could feel the distinct fear emanating from him. A strange feeling spread through the room. It was as if there was an undeniable reminder that something was terribly wrong, and they still did not know the full truth. Mr. Thomas, who was still standing near the coffin, began to tremble slightly. He turned to look at the others, then shook his head, as if unable to believe what was happening. "I can't believe it," he said, his voice weak. Richard's death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of it all. Mr. Thomas didn't finish his sentence, but his eyes said it all. Everyone began to realize that this strange occurrence wasn't just about Max or the man in the coffin. It was all tied to Richard, to the deep secrets he had kept hidden. A small sound suddenly echoed, causing everyone to jump. It was the creaking of wood. The coffin began to move. The lid of the coffin slowly opened, not because someone touched it, but as if some invisible force was causing it to open on its own. Max, despite his fear, remained still, as though he knew something horrific was about to happen. When the coffin was fully opened, a cold gust of wind blew into the room, causing all the lights to go out, leaving only a thick darkness. The faint light from the window outside illuminated just enough to make out shadowy figures. A strange form appeared inside the coffin. It was not a normal person, but a grotesque creature. A monster with pale skin, blood-red eyes, and a thin, emaciated body, unlike any creature they had ever seen. This monster seemed to have died, but it still existed in a horrific form, as if it had never left the coffin. It stirred slightly, and then a horrifying sound came from its mouth, a deep growl, sending chills down everyone's spines. Max, upon seeing the creature, immediately backed away, wagging his tail in fear. The others couldn't move. They stood there, their eyes wide with terror. No one dared to approach, but no one could leave. It was at this moment that all the secrets about Richard, the teammate in the coffin, and all the strange events began to be revealed. Many years ago, in a brutal battle, Richard and his teammate were cursed by a malevolent spell. They were not just ordinary soldiers. They had made a pact with a dark force during the war. After the battle, Richard's teammate, along with Richard himself, was possessed by a strange power, a creature from the darkness. It was this creature that had caused Richard to keep the truth about his friend's death a secret. So when Richard's teammate died, it was actually his soul that had been taken by this creature, and his body remained in the coffin, waiting for the moment when its power would rise again. The presence of the creature in the coffin was not the end, but a warning for everyone. Max had known this for a long time, and that was why the dog never stopped barking. He had sensed that the creature was slowly awakening, and Max was merely a warning signal for all of them. At that moment, a cold gust of wind blew through the room, and the creature began to stir more violently. Its red eyes stared at everyone, as if it was trying to break free. The entire room was consumed by darkness, and a sense of fear enveloped them all. Then, in a moment, everything went silent. Max, too exhausted to bark any longer, lay down. Everyone stood motionless, unsure of what to do. They knew that they had uncovered a secret too great, and now no one could turn back. The final door to the truth had been opened, and everything they knew had changed forever. The presence of the creature would never leave, and their lives would never return to what they once were. Thank you all for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the best stories. See you in the next one.